And so I will turn it over to Cliff Kirikoff to introduce our speaker tonight.
Hi,
Cliff?
everybody. Thanks for coming in and attending the seminar. It's going to be very fascinating. The Chesapeake Bay Program is based in Annapolis, Maryland, and they are the coordinators of all the different groups, federal, state, that are working on restoration of the bay. Rachel is the communications director for the program, and previously she worked at the Environmental Protection Agency in DC, which is a good coincidence because Barbara also worked there. And she worked at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. She has a master's degree in environmental management and policy from the University of Pittsburgh. The Chesapeake Bay Program has a wonderful website, as I mentioned, and it's chesapeakebay.net. And Rachel will also indicate that in her talk. It's a great pleasure, Rachel, to have you here, and thanks so much for joining us in an evening program, and we're looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you so much, Cliff, and hi, everybody. Thank you to the whole Conservation Council for asking me to speak tonight. As Cliff said, my name is Rachel Felver, and I'm the Communications Director with the Chesapeake Bay Program. So to start off this evening, I'd like to talk a little bit about exactly what is the Chesapeake Bay Program. We are a very unique regional partnership that consists of representatives from federal and state agencies, local governments, academic institutions, non-governmental organizations, businesses, and individuals. Take myself, for example. My home organization is actually the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, but my staff and I are fully funded through a grant to the Chesapeake Bay Program. We set the policy and oversee the ultimate restoration and protection of the Chesapeake Bay. Funding for our work comes primarily from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but over 2/3 of our annual budget goes directly back to states and localities to fund on-the-ground restoration work to help restore and protect the bay. In a nutshell, we provide solutions to sustain a thriving Chesapeake Bay watershed. We say we're fueled by science and driven by partnership. Our commitment to the Chesapeake Bay guides all of the work that we do. The Chesapeake Bay is such a crucial natural resource for everybody that lives, works, and plays within its watershed, not just those that live among its shores. It is an economic powerhouse, and it increases the health and well-being of all of us that are here in this region. Our work relies on rigorous science, quality assurance and control, policy, and management. This approach that is combined with world-class experts allows us to be responsible to the changing needs of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, including those of our people. This process is referred to as adaptive management, and it is the backbone of everything that our program does. But our work could not be accomplished without the many partners across of our watershed. We see ourselves as conveners. We bring in everybody involved in bay restoration and get them at the same table. Every one of our partners is critical to the overall health of the bay, its surrounding rivers and streams, and its lands. Our partnership is led by the Chesapeake Executive Council, which consists of the governors of the 6 Chesapeake Bay watershed states, Delaware, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia, as well as the mayor of the District of Columbia, the chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission, and the administrator of the EPA, who represents the entire federal government. We refer to these folks as the signatories of the watershed agreement. I'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. Currently, Governor Northam of Virginia is the chair of our executive council. This position rotates every year at its annual meeting. This year, we actually are going to be having 2 meetings. The first will actually be October 1st in Virginia Beach, and it's going to be more of a watershed retreat, although we will live stream the public meeting. And the second one is going to be in December in Richmond, which is more of the traditional meeting. Additionally, we have representatives from non-governmental organizations, the academic institutions, businesses, and local governments that participate in one or more of our work groups. The EPA maintains an office, as Cliff said, here in Annapolis, Maryland, well, here for me, where staff, grantees, contractors, and some select academic, federal, or state agency partners work. These are the people that are responsible for ensuring the work that they do day to day runs the operations of the Bay Program, and we more commonly refer to all of us as the Chesapeake Bay Program Office. With such a common name, though, I wanted to take a moment to clarify who we are not. We are not solely the Environmental Protection Agency. We receive a large portion of funding from them, but they are just one voice in our decision-making process, along with the other members of that executive council that I mentioned above. We are also not any of these organizations that have Chesapeake Bay in their title. We do not litigate, fundraise, or advocate on behalf of the Chesapeake Bay. Any of these organizations listed here, however, I'm sure would be more than happy to take your donation. As I mentioned previously, members of our Chesapeake Executive Council are referred to as the signatories of the Watershed Agreement. And Barbara, do you have a question for me?
I do. In that list of all of the Chesapeake organizations, are all of them among your partners, or are some of them partners and some of them are independents, or how does that work exactly?
So we technically consider anybody that is a member of a work group that I will talk a little bit more about in a minute to be one of our partners. So I will say, looking at this list right here, the Chesapeake Legal Alliance and Waterkeepers Chesapeake are technically not partners, but everybody else is.
Thank you.
So just as I was talking about the watershed agreement, so the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement is what governs our partnership and all of the work that we do. We've had a few watershed agreements at this point, but our most current one was signed in 2014. It contains 5 themes: abundant life, clean water, climate change, conserve lands, and engage communities. Under these 5 themes, there are 10 goals and 31 outcomes. Each one of these outcomes has related work groups. So just think about that for a second, and you'll see where we get all those partners. So each one of those work groups is dedicated to meeting the restoration target for these 31 outcomes. So just as an example, we have an oyster outcome, which seeks to restore native oyster habitat and populations in 10 tributaries by 2025. So members of this work group are striving to meet this target, and they come from many different organizations. For instance, some of these partners include Virginia Institute of Marine Science, the Elizabeth River Project, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Pleasure House Oysters from an individual business standpoint, and the city of Norfolk, Virginia. And that's just a few, there's many others. But I wanted to specifically call out the water quality theme of the watershed agreement. I will assume that most of you here on this call are familiar with, or have heard of at least, the Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load, otherwise known as the Bay TMDL. It is also commonly referred to as a pollution diet, or by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation as the Clean Water Blueprint. It's a regulatory effort that was put in place by EPA to help protect the Chesapeake Bay back in 2010. The Bay TMDL sets limits on the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment pollution that each of the 6 watershed states and the District of Columbia can release into the Chesapeake Bay and still have it meet standards for healthy water quality. As I mentioned, the Bay TMDL was put into place in December 2010 under President Obama, with the goal of having each one of these partners, the 6 states and DC, have all of the necessary practices in place to meet their pollution reduction targets by 2025. So just to clarify, it doesn't mean that they have to reduce all of the pollution by 2025, but they need to have their practices in the ground so they know that they're going to be able to reduce those pollution over time. And I know many of you are familiar with these practices, best management practices, and all that information is computed through our very high class modeling system, which I will get into a little bit later. So these targets vary for each of the states in DC, and they were determined and calculated through state-of-the-art modeling tools, extensive monitoring data, peer-reviewed science, and interactions with each state in DC. In crafting the watershed agreement, partners also wanted to include elements of the Bay TMDL to recognize its importance to the Bay program. So 2 outcomes I have listed here, the 2025 watershed implementation plans and also the water quality standards, attainment and monitoring, are the ways in which the TMDL can integrate into the watershed agreement. So the 2025 watershed implementation plan, or WIPS, considers the modeling data and tracking our progress. And while the water quality standards, attainment and monitoring outcome is tracked using our monitoring data. I mentioned tracking progress toward these 2 outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that and how we share that information to the public in a very transparent manner. So this is Chesapeake Progress. It's a publicly accessible website that tracks all the progress we're making towards meeting the outcomes of our watershed agreement. It's a one-stop shop for all of your data and information, and includes the most current data that we have available for our outcomes collected from all the experts across the watershed. And it's updated real time. So you don't necessarily have to wait for a whole annual report to come out at some point during the year. You can just go to this website. And if you give me a minute, I will pull it up so you can see it yourself. All right, so here is Chesapeake Progress. As you see here, the 5 themes of the watershed agreement are all listed up top here. I'm going to particularly just walk you through one of the clean water ones, and I'll let you all explore on your own afterwards. So clean water, let's go to that water quality standards and attainment monitoring outcome. So all of the outcomes on this page have a very similar template so you can figure out what you're looking at. So what you see up top here is the actual language from our watershed agreement that basically says what we're trying to achieve by whatever the date is. Most of them are 2025. And then we also have a little icon here that talks about whether or not progress is going up, going down, staying the same. And unfortunately, as you see here, not too great. The next thing you see is the actual progress and a little bit of explanation of, what the current level is, and a little bit of an explanation of how it's been, the trends are through time. So I will mention we are about to update our water quality standards outcome in the next month. So this data is a little outdated. So the previous assessment period, as you see here, was from 2016 to 2018. And unfortunately, the Chesapeake Bay was found to only have 38% of healthy water quality, which is not good. And our previous assessment period was 42%, which actually was the highest we've ever achieved since we started tracking when the Bay program started. So I'm not sure what it's going to say when the new data comes out. We're getting ready for that right now. But so this gives you a little bit more information and about why that score was calculated. The next thing that we have is all sorts of charts and graphs of this information. And what's really nice about all these is you can click on these buttons, you can download the raw data. You can download a methods document that explains more detail, very scientific and technical about how they reach this information. And you can also take a screenshot of all of these charts and graphs. So if you're going to put it in a presentation or you want to show it, it's there as well. And I'll just scan through these. We have a lot of them on this one. More information is usually below, a little bit more detail. And this I want to point out, so this particular outcome relies on monitoring data, obviously. So I did want to show you that there is one along the James in Cartersville, Virginia, in which they monitor. And I would say for you, both long-term and the 10-year trend, the James is actually looking better than most other rivers in the watershed.
Wow.
And just a little bit more information. Each one of these outcomes has what we call a management strategy and a logic and action plan. The management strategy is kind of a thicker document that basically lays out, what are the issues? How are we going to achieve this? And it's more of kind of a higher level vision. But then the logic and action plans are updated every 2 years, and it lists out the specific activities and how we are going to be how they're going to achieve that outcome. So they're assessed on progress every 2 years. And then this is a list of the partners that participate with this particular outcome. So you can see they vary from outcome to outcome. Okay. Go back to this. So the next thing I want to share with you is Vaporometer. So the Vaporometer actually is our annual report in which we kind of do a roll up of all of our updated indicators. So this is their most recent one that just came out this year. And I also actually pulled this up just to give you a view of what it looks like. It is available on our website. But it's a very nice publication. Typically we print them out, and anybody that wants one, we are happy to hand them out. We didn't this year just because of the pandemic, because we didn't see anybody to hand them out. But this is up here. We usually have just a note from our director. And typically what we've done in the past couple years is we've actually included the outcome and progress statement for every single outcome we have. And if it hasn't been updated that year, because everything's on a different time scale, we've put a little bit of a blurb, like here's information about what that work group has done over the past year, or any other like relevant information that you might want to know. So this is personally what a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears goes into every year. So I like to promote it to people. So I also want to mention, in addition to our Vaporometer, there's actually 2 other assessments of bay health that are put together every year. One is done by the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, and that's the Chesapeake Bay Report Card. And the other one is put out by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation on a 2-year basis, and that's called their State of the Bay Report. And in all honesty, there's not much difference between all 3 reports. The other 2 reports actually depend on our data to figure out the score they give every year. The only difference is really kind of when they come out, and the fact that those 2 also roll up their indicators to give the Bay Health a score, like a letter grade. Okay. So I'm going to turn away from the Bay for a moment, and I want to talk to you about the health of your local rivers, which I understand is more the Maury River as well as the James. So I want to apologize. I don't have a ton of information about the Maury River, but what I did learn I want to share is our partners from the U.S. Geological Survey actually do have a monitoring station on the Maury. And I know that on their webpage, you can probably look at the real-time data to see what the conditions are. And this doesn't mean much to me, but I'm sure it does to you. It says it's located near Buena Vista. So if you know where that is, that's where the monitoring station is by USGS. And I also wanted to tell you that one of our outcomes in our watershed agreement is public access, in which we are consistently looking to add new public access sites for which people can get out and access the water. And actually in 2017, there was 2 public access sites that were added at the Maury River. One was the Route 60 bridge near VMI, and the other one at a place called Locker Landing. So I just wanted to show you a little bit how you guys are contributing there with your local water. And then to talk a little bit more about the James. So in comparison with the overall Bay, the James is actually doing not bad. So a lot of the data we get is actually from the State of the James report put out by the James River Association. So just I have the link here to their most recent report, which was put out in 2019. And similarly to what we do is they have indicators that roll up into a letter grade. So what we see working is you have a very strong bald eagle recovery. Your smallmouth bass population is recovering. You're protecting your lands. And similar to a lot of other places around the watershed, your wastewater pollution controls are very strong. We're seeing that trend across the entire watershed. And then kind of similar to also what we're seeing across the entire watershed is sediment and phosphorus is not doing so great. Oysters are not doing so great. And that impacts the entire tidal water quality. Bacteria is still a problem. And similar to what we're seeing in other places too, shad populations are declining. So just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of kind of what we're seeing in your neck of the woods. And like I said, the link below will be able to take you to the full report for more information. So I've also included here 2 resources that the Bay Program has put out that you may find interesting. The first one is something that our modeling team kind of created recently. We have several different rivers. So they looked at trends in tidal water quality over a period of time. You can see here since 1985 to kind of say, okay, we see nitrogen pollution's not doing well. We see sediment pollution's not doing well, or it's improving. But let's look at those scores over time and see like why why is it bad? Why is it good? So, which is actually pretty interesting. These are a little scientifically jargon, unfortunately, but it's still a really neat look about what has been influencing the pollution in the James River over the last almost, I guess, 35 years. And there's a link there as well for you to look at the report. And the other one I have here is with our Vaporometer release this year, we always do a state-specific fact sheet. And this is the fact sheet for Virginia. So this takes a look at the most updated indicators that we had this year and kind of just distills it down just to Virginia to give you a look at your progress. So, and there's a link to that as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about what the Bay program has to offer and why we are so unique. We offer world-class scientific data and information, access to subject matter experts across a variety of environmental fields. We have a lot of shareable web content, which I'll talk more about, including articles and blogs and photos and videos. So thanks to our experts and scientists, our partners have pioneered cutting-edge science and research. In the early 1990s, our researchers determined that airborne nitrogen was a significant contributor to Bay pollution. So our computer models are among the most sophisticated and studied throughout the entire world. Our Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative works with groups and individuals throughout the watershed to standardize data collected through community science efforts to make it publicly available. And Barbara was telling me earlier that you all have a very great water quality monitoring team. And the CMC, which I will show you their website in a bit, is a great way to get involved because the data that they are collecting single-handedly goes into our data sets to be influencing policy and the decisions we make to be restoring the Bay and our local waters. Our Chesapeake Bay Watershed Data Dashboard is an online tool that provides accessibility and visualization of data and technical information to guide water quality planning efforts. And finally, the link below will take you to our flagship website, chesapeakebay.net, that specifically lists out all the other data sets that we have available for people if they need to use them. So we offer access, as I said, to some of the world's leading experts in a variety of environmental disciplines. This is just a sampling of some of them. And I did want to share with you this link here. We have a Chesapeake expert database that our partners at Chesapeake Research Consortium stood up. You can certainly search for any topic you're interested in learning more about, and it's a self-signing up thing. So a lot of different professors from around the area that maybe have an expert in, let's say, blue crabs, or have an expert in a particular bacteria, you can just search for them and see who comes up. Like I know I even am in there if you need communications help, but nobody's reached out yet. We also offer a plethora of original content on our website for the web and also in forms of articles and blogs. So I'm going to stop now and walk you through a little bit of ChesapeakeBay.net. So this is our flagship website, ChesapeakeBay.net. It's kind of almost two websites in one in a certain way, because there's a section of it that's very internal for our partnership, where we list meeting informations and everything we do. All of our information is transparent and accessible, including all of our meetings. Anybody can come to them if you want to. But the other part of our website, we initially geared it for teachers and students. So we kind of hope that it's in a very public-friendly, easy to understand manner. So very quickly, I'm just going to show you a little bit of what we have here. So the first tab is our Discover the Chesapeake website. And this is where you can get sort of a baseline understanding of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We have a history page that literally goes back into the Ice Age to talk about how the Bay was formed up until current times. Our most popular section is our field guide, where I will actually show you this quickly. You can look up plants and animals and browse to find out more information. We do a critter of the month, which is the American persimmon this month in September. So feel free to look around. We have lots of great information, and we're continuing to add more. I did that not even on purpose, but there you go. So, and also if more to discover the Chesapeake, we also have our Bay 101 series, which I'll come back to, more information about facts and figures about the watershed, things that we've collected, which is some of these are pretty interesting. The mouth of the Chesapeake Bay is 12 miles wide between Cape Charles and Cape Henry, things like that. And we also have other educational resources, FAQs. Anybody could submit a question and we will answer it and get back to you. All of our photos and videos, glossary terms, information about watersheds in general. And then our newly added page this year is for Chesapeake Bay Awareness Week, which is a week that is held kind of in the middle of the first and second weeks of June every year. And so this is the page, and we kind of help coordinate that effort every year with all different organizations. Our Learn the Issues section here basically delves into all the issues that are impacting the Bay with more information. So just click on the first one to see what I'm referring to. So we talk through, for instance, agriculture, so necessary, and so many farmers are doing such a wonderful job. But we also know that work is needed to help with getting best management practices on the farm, helping with different runoffs. So this just gives an overview. Why is it important? How is it impacting the Bay? Goes into different types of either best management practices or things that need to be accomplished, and issues like pesticides, fertilizers, and things like that. So, and then we obviously have that for all of the issues that you see listed here. Our State of the Chesapeake Bay takes some of our more interesting statistics that we do not formally track through the watershed agreement, and we put it up here. So I'm going to click on one that actually is doing quite well in the last couple of years, which is the dead zone of the Bay. So this just talks about, right now, the largest one ever recorded, average size, and then it gives the most updated information of where we are right now. So this would be from last year, because obviously we don't have this year's full information yet. So that's kind of a fun way to look at some of how things are doing. And as I mentioned, like bald eagles as well, we try, when we get updated information, we try to track that as well. Our take action is also pretty interesting. We have, and I will get more into this later, we have a great how-to and tips page that gives you information about how you can help the Bay, different tips, and we have them categorize them, for instance, at home, if you're in your car, if you're on your boat, and things like that. We also have a find a group page, which is also, you can put in your zip code, your address, and we have as many watershed groups as we can find on our map here that you can look to volunteer with or get involved, go to an event, things like that. We also have an event calendar that we try to keep updated, and we're looking to continually refine this, but we put events when we know them here all around the watershed, and these are more volunteer events, family-friendly events, raft ups, fun on the farm, all sorts of things. And so we do our best to keep this as updated as possible. Our Visit the Chesapeake page here, as I mentioned before, our public access sites. This actually tells you where all of our public access sites are. So if you want to find a place near you where you can go ahead and get out on the water, all you have to do is kind of just click on these links, and this will tell you exactly where they are. And the last one, which I definitely will promote, is we do have 3 newsletters, a daily, a weekly, and a monthly. You can click here to sign up for them. Our Bay News is our daily, which is just a roundup of all the media clips that day about anything in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Our Bay Brief comes out weekly, and that lists jobs, internships, funding opportunities, events. That is always, we do a really good job at updating that as well. And then Chesapeake Currents is our monthly newsletter that's kind of a distillation of all the articles that we do ourselves, which I'm going to talk about now. We have a very robust blog that we try to post at least 2 to 3 articles per week. And this is what mainly my team is responsible for. They do a great job at collecting content and different stories. So for instance, we posted one today that one of our summer interns wrote, debuzzing the latest environmental buzzword, for instance. And then we did the one about the local persimmon last week. One of our team members did one about university arboretums around the watershed. We just featured a local report about freshwater mussels that just came out. So we really do a great job at content. And the great thing is all of these blogs and anything on this website is available for reproducing it if you need it in newspapers or anything else. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then, as I mentioned, we do have more of the internal Bay program page, but if you need to contact us, how we're organized, all that information is here, as well as our meetings calendar. Any type of updated grants and RFPs are always listed there, as well as all the publication data and maps that we produce, and there's a lot in there. So any questions? Cliff, was there anything else you want me to cover specifically about the website? No? Okay. I think you're on mute.
How's that?
Much better.
Hey, all right. I got confused about off and on there, but excellent overview. One of the things I like particularly just to get visuals or to help people kind of visualize the Chesapeake Bay program, you have videos and photographs, as I recall, on the website.
Yes, I'm getting to that next, so don't worry.
And okay, because that seemed to me to be pretty neat also for maybe classroom use in some of the local schools or whatever. It'd be kind of interesting in a science class to use that material.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for setting me up for that.
Okay.
Let me go back to the presentation here. All right. So, as Cliff mentioned, we have a very robust photo and video archive. And I have specific notes here that my multimedia manager asked me to read, so I'm going to make sure I cover them. So we present a range of documentary visual storytelling that features the people and places that make up the watershed. Our photo and video storytelling first appear as part of the many articles that we just showed in our blogs. So like all of our other content, we freely share our archive of video and video footage for non-commercial or media use. Most things that are educational or editorial would qualify. So to date, and I'll show you this in a second, we have over 14,000 photographs available through our archive, which is searchable on Flickr. We offer a range of subjects. We visit parks. We have wildlife photography that is well represented. We cover restoration efforts from forest buffers to cover crops to green infrastructure. And we also have a large amount of aerial photography, thanks in part to a partnership we have with South Wings, which takes photographers up for free to photograph conservation areas. Sorry, I just lost my place, my apologies. Okay, so as we were mentioning, I'll go back to our website now. We have a video series called Bay 101. So as here, this is actually what you mentioned that's probably really good for educational use. We have a lot of different short snippets, 3 to 5 minute videos about a range of different Bay topics. So agriculture, algae blooms, air pollution, bay grasses, could go on and on and on. You're welcome to take a look through these and use them. They're really wonderful, high quality videos. So this is our Flickr account. I have the next slide I'm going to show has all of these links on it, but we have everything separated into albums. A lot of them are by county, by state, or by particular different topic, fungi, you can see. We also have, for instance, like all the photos used in our Vaporometers over the years. So you can definitely take a look, and so you can search obviously through Flickr to find a photo that you're particularly looking for. Let me pull this back up. And just to give you an idea of how some of this is used, all of the videos can be embedded in presentations and web pages, and I'm actually going to show you that myself in a little bit. But you can also request raw footage from us because we have a ton of that. It can be used in your own video projects. We've covered everything from watermen to wildlife, both on land and underwater. So right here, this bottom photo is the portion of a recent Bay Journal article about mitigating flood risks in the New York portion of the watershed, where one of our videos was included as part of the article. And the one on top is a recent example of our photos in which the Maryland Sea Grant's Chesapeake Quarterly published a piece on microplastics and used our photography there. So here's some links: our Vimeo site, our YouTube site, the Flickr page, our terms of use. And basically, if you want to use any of our content, from the blogs to the photos to the videos, we just ask that you send a little note to requests@chesapeakebay.net. Let us know what you want, and we will just keep track of that and try to help you in any way we can. So I know I'm getting short on time, but I want to just quickly go through a couple of other additional resources in the form of websites that we have that are available to you all. And I'm not going to click through these individually, but you can definitely feel free. The links are all here to take a look at them yourself. So the first one is Bay Backpack. This actually provides educators with information about funding opportunities, curriculum and lessons plans for different types of environmental education. We have a blog on there for different events, different schools, and things like that. This is our Chesapeake Tree Canopy Network. It provides resources, stories, best practices about to help understand tree canopy in general, and also how to expand and maintain it. And similarly, this is the Chesapeake Riparian Forest Buffer Network. It gives you information about forest buffers, the resources, and also success stories throughout the watershed. This is one of our newest websites. It's called Wetlands Work. It's a resource that helps connect agricultural landowners in the watershed with people and programs that can help support wetland restoration on their land. And this is the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative, which I mentioned earlier. This is a great website. I actually work with the Director of Water Quality at the Alliance. And just if you're unfamiliar with it, they provide training to different volunteer groups across the watershed. And there's a few different levels. I know we have a tier 1, we have a tier 2 level training. And the team is always willing to travel to teach you or do virtual in these times of COVID. And there's lots of resources on this page. And as I mentioned, and there's also the Chesapeake Data Explorer, where you can upload your data and information, look through the data. And as mentioned, a lot of that data is used by the EPA, by other federal organizations to make decisions. So you are really helping in what we do with the watershed. This is the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Data Dashboard. This is a little bit interesting because it is kind of meant to help planners with their watershed implementation plans, but it hikes the information and kind of makes it a little bit more understandable than what you'd find on our larger planning websites. And I'm actually really excited because I have been personally working on a new module for this that's going to be a case study database that allows you to search for different case studies across the watershed. For instance, if you're looking to figure out how you want to save money through green infrastructure, you'll be able to read through certain case studies to see how other communities have done similar practices and what funding they might have used and things like that. So that should be hopefully out in about the next month. So make sure to stop back and see it. And on the technical side is our Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool. I wouldn't recommend using this unless you have to, but this is where you would put in information about best management practices to get an idea about how much pollution they are going to reduce. So a lot of our planners in different localities and state agencies use this. So I wanted to wrap up quickly with the question that I get asked the most, which is, how can I help protect the Bay and local water quality? So I know I obviously already showed you some of our websites, the how-to tips and tricks, but basically I just wanted to say to everybody that no action is too small. So at your home, some of the things you can do: redirect your downspouts, think about implementing some green infrastructure like rain gardens or permeable pavers, use some toxic-free cleaning products. If you have a boat, try to trim your motors, don't pull up bay grasses, don't litter. Simple things, but just that one thing that you do can really help. And as I mentioned, these are just the websites that I pointed out before. More tips and tricks: find a group to volunteer with, find events near you. And also make sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We post daily, multiple times, and we try to answer everything as quickly as they come in. And if we have a few minutes, if there's no questions, I do have a lovely video that's about 5 minutes that talks about the partnership if you'd like to see it. Let's see if it works.
Let's try the video. There are a couple of questions, but I think we can do both.
Okay.
Begins in New York, but also Virginia and Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Delaware, and DC. The Chesapeake Bay Watershed spans 64,000 square miles. This is the area of land where rain or snow ultimately flows to the Chesapeake.
Everybody is in a watershed.
The stream that goes through your neighborhood, you can see how it's connected to the bay.
Whatever starts way up there, it comes down here, ends up going down to the bay.
The Susquehanna River, for example, travels hundreds of miles through cities and farmland, and pollution in one place is carried downstream.
The unity of the whole thing. There is no such thing as just a part of the bay. What happens in every part of the bay affects every other part. Well, I can remember when Chesapeake Bay was relatively clear water. Now all of that really has changed.
I think we have Mac Mathias to thank because he was one of the early people that said we got to do something about this body of water.
The oyster cake is down dramatically from what it was at the beginning of the century. Fish are harder to find.
Things were not looking very good in the 1960s and 70s. That's when our aquatic grasses just crashed. That's when that water clarity really started to get bad.
Oysters, blue crabs, striped bass, brook trout, hunting, fishing, hiking, biking, kayaking, canoeing, all of those things are really important to both the economy and the recreation area.
Well, you've got species diversity, of course, but we've got tons of diversity of people. I first experienced the Chesapeake Bay from a workboat.
On another level, it's this place where my kids can go and my members can go and find a level of peace.
I've grown up on this land. I followed my dad all around on it.
I'm a fourth generation farmer. You know, I like to fish and crab, and I wanted to be there for my kids and my grandchildren.
Chesapeake Bay and the tributaries is not just a way to make a living. It's a tradition. It's a way of life. It's kind of in your blood.
The oysters act as a filter to clean the water. So the more oysters come back, the better the water quality will be.
In 1975, at the urging of Senator Mathias, Congress funded a 5-year study of the bay's failing health, coordinated by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In 1983, the Chesapeake Bay Commission sponsored a conference at George Mason University.
And that was the point at which the governor signed the first Bay Agreement. That was the beginning of the Chesapeake Bay Program.
The 83 agreement was not even a budget thing. They were just trying to understand what's wrong with the Chesapeake.
We did all kinds of outreach for the Bay Program to explain in lay language what was going on with the Bay and get feedback on proposed actions.
The Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay also made sure that there was a citizen monitoring effort very early on so that citizens could get involved not only in how they can help restore the bay, but also in monitoring success.
As the Bay Agreements have evolved over time, they've gotten more comprehensive in terms of trying to capture what are all the different activities us humans carry out on the land that could influence local waters and could influence the Chesapeake.
This great partnership of so many different federal agencies, state agencies, and governments, as well as community foundations and nonprofit organizations, all work together to understand better what's happening in Chesapeake Bay so that we can make the decisions that will actually help improve the bay's health.
So all the monitoring we do is coordinated through the Chesapeake Bay Program partnership. We use the monitoring data, one, to improve models that we have to simulate conditions in the bay and its watershed. And those models are used to help say, where do we need to reduce nutrients coming into the bay and by how much to improve conditions for fish. We also then use the monitoring to try to focus where we want to put the restoration efforts. Then finally, we use it over time to say, is the bay and its watershed getting better as we put all these efforts in to reduce pollution?
As we went into the 2014 Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, he asked to put goals in there, to put objectives, leaving flexibility about how we got there.
We do things more than just water quality. It's about really ecosystem management.
We also understood that to be successful, we needed a more diverse group of partners, a more diverse group of leaders that reflected the cultures that we have across the Chesapeake itself.
To have these states come together in the Bay watershed, it's the only way we're going to keep the Bay alive and productive for a long time.
All right. Any questions I can answer?
Okay, if folks want to unmute themselves and just raise their hand to ask questions directly, feel free to do that. I don't want to slow you down by using the chat at this point. We don't have a huge group, so I think that should work well. I will also, I do have some questions here that I could start us off with. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask first? I'm looking around. Not seeing anybody raising their hands yet. So let me start. Maybe these will prompt some more. You mentioned the work groups that take on various of the goals and actions in the watershed. Are those mostly, how does one get involved in a work group, I guess is the question here. Is it individuals? Is it groups? How does one plug into that work?
So most of the members of the work groups are involved in that work in their kind of day-to-day life already. So we have a lot of representatives from different state agencies, from different nonprofit organizations. So I would say you don't normally see just a person off the street that says, I want to necessarily come and join this and do work, but it's anybody that has a vested interest, I would say, and either, I wouldn't say the resources necessarily, but has the time and kind of the expertise to be able to help move the goal together. And like I said, if you have an interest, like I reiterate, all of our meetings are open to the public. So if you're interested in wetlands, feel free to see our wetlands work group page and dial into the next meeting.
Right. You did mention the USGS station here at the southern end of the Maury River. And I just wondered, to what level can we find data on your wonderful website that is so chock full of everything that would help us understand what our little actions here in Rockbridge, in the Rockbridge area, may or may not be contributing? Is there a way to kind of dial into a sub water basin like ours and see how we're doing?
So I will have to look a little bit more into that to get back to you, but I can tell you, and I actually ran out of time today, but I was looking for the actual website on the USGS page that you can go to, because there is a page you can go to that tells you the real-time information of that monitoring site. So you can kind of get a look at the conditions. I shared the link for that trends report, and that's the type of information that you want actually to be able to see of how your actions are helping. I personally don't know if something has been done for the Maury River like it has for the James, but at least that could give you a sense of a slightly bigger picture of how the efforts are going.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then this is sort of related, this question, and that has to do with the implementation plans, the WIP plans that the localities are at least our localities are currently implementing. Is there going to be another phase? I guess we're in phase 3 now, or we're just about to start phase 3. I've sort of lost track of that. And at what point will we know whether our actions in our watershed are as good as they're going to get, and it's up to others, or we need new standards or something to do extra effort?
So this is a little bit where the watershed agreement crosses with the Bay TMDL, in the fact that, and kind of going into my WIP history lessons. So this is obviously the phase 3. And from my understanding, it was kind of always planned to have 3 phases to meet the 2025 goal. So I think the question of whether or not there will be a phase 4 will depend on where we are in 2025 about how meeting that. And I know it's each of the kind of the phase 3 WIPs I know at the different local level are all rolled up to the state level, and they are obviously evaluated by the Environmental Protection Agency. So I can't speak 100% about what that looks like right now. I know the EPA has a great Chesapeake Bay TMDL website where you can get the specific information of how Virginia is doing. But, I will be frank that there is a lot of work that still needed to be done and a lot of pollution reductions that still need to be put into place. So will there be another TMDL? I have no idea. I can't guess to that. I do think at some point there will be an updated Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement. I can't tell you if that'll be in 2026 or 2030, but I do think something will come, because even if we completely restore the bay one day, we're still going to have to protect it down the line.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the agreement does not sunset at any particular goal. It will continue on in a management role if we achieve all of our goals that we have now. Is that a correct sort of outlook?
That is my assumption. And I would say every agreement that we've done, we've looked at new issues, new factors, the new science, new policies. So this, for instance, our most recent one really took into considered stewardship actions, which we hadn't looked at so closely before. We now have an outcome to increase diversity in our environmental movements. We have stronger outcomes in environmental literacy and sustainable schools, as well as a general one in citizen stewardship, where we're trying to increase stewardship actions across the watershed. So I think, we put all the blue crabs back that the bay needs, but we'll still continue working on those other levels as well.
Mm-hmm. This comes from the monitoring folks. One of the issues that has dogged us here in this part of the watershed has been turbidity or sediment in our streams from erosion and stormwater runoff and other sources. Right now, Virginia does not have any sort of a water quality standard for sediment or turbidity. Do other states in the agreement have those standards, and have they been useful in helping to meet the overall goals for the bay?
I'll be honest, I don't know what the state-by-state regulations are. I can tell you that just in the last year, the Chesapeake Bay Program did put a sediment planning target in place that really reinforced our goals under the TMDL of what we are trying to meet as far as reducing sediment across the entire watershed. So under that, obviously, each state is going to be required to take certain actions to strengthen their own policies to do that.
Okay. One of the things I think that that we can confront here, since we're in sort of the headwater region, is we don't, the bay is not in our front or backyard immediately. It's kind of a distant concept to some extent. But one of the programs that when I first came to this part of Virginia was a great success was the sort of an exchange program where watermen and farmers could go spend a week with each other and kind of learn their business and learn how they're connected. I haven't heard much about that recently, and I just wondered if that's a program that is still going on, or which of your partners we might contact to ask about that.
So I will say, I don't think that specific waterman and farmer switch is currently going on. But what I will say is we do have, I should have mentioned, 3 advisory committees that provides advice, and all the people on these committees are appointed by the governors of their states. We have one on science and technical, our science and technical advisory committee. We have a citizens advisory committee, and we also have a local government advisory committee. Our local government advisory committee started right before the pandemic, doing a switch from upstream to downstream with local government officials. So Virginia was the first place they did it. So they brought a lot of folks from the Shenandoah Valley down to the eastern neck or the northern neck of the eastern shore of Virginia. And they have one planned this fall. And I'm not sure because of COVID if it's going to happen up in Pennsylvania to do the same thing and bring them down to the bay.
Oh, great. That sounds like a great thing.
Great.
My own daughter did a trip as a school kid, and I know it made a big impression on her just seeing the bay and learning about it.
Absolutely. And we try to say all the time that what's really important is, you're protecting the bay, but you're protecting the water that you're drinking, you're swimming in, you're using to wash. So protecting that water in your backyard also protects the bay, but that's what's really important to you.
This question comes from a member who couldn't be here tonight, but as you'll tell from the topic of the question, has a particular interest. She's wondering about beaver reintroduction and whether that is going on in any part of the bay that you're aware of. Is that part of any of the implementation strategies that have been identified?
So I can tell you personally at the Bay Program that the work we do every day, I don't know of anything of that degree. I'd be happy to look into it though, to see if there's more information. And I can say, I do know that every year there is a beaver conference that takes place in the watershed. So I can get more information and I'll send that back to you.
We have somebody who would be very interested in that. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let me see here. I think I've covered pretty much everything that I had written down that others have submitted, and one or two of my own. Is there anybody else on the call now who has a question that they'd like to ask? You'll have to unmute yourself and speak up if you do. All right, I am not hearing any. I'm seeing some smiles. Cliff, do you want to wrap us up? It's just about 8 o'clock now, so I think our time is at an end pretty much. And let us know something about the series itself, as well as how people will be able to get the information that Rachel has presented here tonight.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. And thank you so much, Rachel, for taking the time to be with us. And as I indicated earlier, folks who cannot come tonight, we will have on our website archive this entire presentation, and also Barbara can send to all of our members, several hundred we have, the slides of your presentation, so folks can learn about it that way electronically through our email system. And I think it's exciting that you have some work groups that some of us might be able to plug in, the water quality folks, et cetera, in our group. I think we'll be very interested in that. And I was happy that you have a beaver work group, because the lady who's very passionate about that, and she's working hard on that restoration concept. Actually, I know in England, there's quite an active beaver restoration activity going on in the UK. So it's an interesting thing. Our series will continue next month with a program on Virginia Green, which is linked to our state travel department. And Virginia Green is a program for restaurants and hotels for waste reduction, particularly plastics. And we hope here in Lexington that we have a very active subgroup in our RACC organization who are quite interested in plastics and waste reduction. So that'll be pretty exciting. And then we have several other programs coming up. For November, we have a Dark Skies program about hopefully reducing light pollution, et cetera, et cetera. And then December is going to be a surprise. That's open. We're going to see what we can come up with in December. Well, Rachel, thanks so much for coming. And your website is spectacular, and we'll try to get that well known to our members through our email list. And also some of our educators can certainly use, if I were still teaching, I could certainly use a lot of your videos and your imagery in my classroom work, which really makes it very, very a good experience for the teacher as well as the students, of course. Well, again, thanks so much, Rachel, and thanks for everybody for coming, and thank you, Barbara, for your magnificent work and managing and monitoring and all that.
It's your show. Thank you so much, Rachel. This has been phenomenal. I have filled 2 pages of follow-up items. So you might be a busy person in the next couple of days.
Well, my contact information is here. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if I can be helpful in any way.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.